So, Andrew, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it was a very interesting talk, and I'm sure that it will get some very interesting questions from the audience as well. But prior to that, we've got two very interesting business leaders here in Portugal as well that are here today with us to comment on your thoughts. And that's João Picoito, the head of Southern Europe for Nokia Siemens Networks, and José Gonçalves, the CEO of Logica in Iberia. So before we turn into the audience to ask some questions, I'll start by asking João and José Carlos to comment on Andrew's words. And I think that, João, maybe we can kick it off in the following way. Andrew talked a lot about this digital world, I would say in a more B2C world. Now, you are more into the B2B world. Can his comments, can his thoughts be translated into your more B2B world?
Right. Well, first of all, I would like to thank APDC and Gonçalves for the invitation. I think it's great to be here. And I really enjoyed your speech, your presentation. And I would like to start with, presenting my analog tablet. So it's quite popular, the Moleskine. My son, when he was last birthday, I gave him an iPad, right? And as a reciprocity, he gave me a Moleskine. So it's quite a paradox. No, I think that I took some notes, and I think we touch here several points. We talk here about leadership, right? So and leadership is connected, as I see it. In this industry, and let me make a note. This industry is for sure the most innovative industry in the world, right? If you compare this industry with aeronautics, with heavy chemical industry, with light chemical industry, with auto industry, for sure this industry is the most innovative, right? And so the type of skills you need to drive this industry forward, I think are different. So, in my career, I started, I've been basically all my professional life in this industry. So in the infrastructure industry, so business to business, or how you call it, not in the consumer. Although I was for 2 or 3 years responsible also for mobile phones at Siemens. I see Francisco, now he's working for Samsung, but he used to work for me. He was running the mobile phones here in Portugal. But most of my career has been in the infrastructure business, so business to business, and I see that the skill set that we need at the leadership level, and here I'm not talking about the top leaders in the company, but in the bottom, in the middle, is quite different and is quite demanding. I was particularly interested about what is the profile. Taking the 3 vectors, experience, IQ, and soft skills to be successful and to not to be successful. And it's quite interesting that, failure is connected with 65% IQ, so, more intelligent people. I think that we talk about articulated knowledge, right? So not tacit knowledge, but articulated knowledge. So 65%, are more connected to failure, and 50% with success, which means, what is the message here? You don't need to be, I don't want to put it so blunt, but you're right. You got the point. But it's right. I think that soft skills is quite important. I'm driving South Europe at NSN, so this means all countries in the North Mediterranean arch, from Lisbon up to Tel Aviv. And so it's a big team, and when we select people, right, it's the attitude that is most important. I'm not asking people, what have you done or what do you know. I'm asking people, what do you want to do? How do you want to do? What is your, what you bring, So and sometimes people don't focus on this. Sometimes people focus pretty much on what is your experience and what you have done, not what you want to do, and attitudes. You talk about the job titles. It's not about job titles. It's about responsibility. We NSN, so we are a company that we have 50% equity from Siemens AG, and 50% equity from Nokia, but we are pretty much an independent company, so we run it basically as an independent company. So we are a new company. We have just been formed in 2007. We don't use these, VP and CEO and so on. I mean, we have one CEO, obviously, and so the management, the top management, we use this type of head. Many people ask me, what is this head? So I say I'm head of South Europe. And head means you have P&L responsibility. It's not clear for people. What is this head? Head of what? So means P&L responsibility. And that's the point. What is my job? My job, I have the P&L responsibility for South Europe, and that's it. So, so a lot of things. We talk now about Google and, about, all these, fancy things. But we talk also about Apple. I'm been following Apple since, since I finished technical, so in 87, and I remember these old, very nice Macs, and in the 90s we said, these guys, they go nowhere, because, you have the Intel, you have Microsoft, so they kind of, duality when they bring, you need to control me.
It's okay, go
so
on.
I'm looking at it, but it's, I don't know what's the meaning of these digital numbers, so you need to tell me. But and when you see how Steve Jobs, he had pretty much a couple of failures across his career, right? But he really did it with the tablet, with the iPod, and this concept of minimalist in design, and so very much user-centric and so on. But he had a lot of failures. As I said, my career is basically in this industry. So I started at Alcatel in R&D, and we were developing the best, most modern, software system in the world of communications, right? But it was really too much advanced for that time. And at Siemens, in the 90s, I was living in Munich, and at that time, Siemens was pretty much influenced by the analysts, and the analysts were always saying, you guys need to get rid of security. Siemens had a huge security and defense business. And so finally, Siemens got rid of it, And then the same analysts said, now you need to get rid of energy, right? And also of medical, health technology, And Mr. von Pierre, he was saying, okay, right, we got rid of security and defense. By the way, a lot of assets in the UK. And then, suddenly he said, okay, we stop. Now, it was the 90s, right? And in the 90s, communications was the big star, So we were really the biggest stars in the company. So in this big conglomerate with 500,000 employees, right? And then came the 2000, and then came the Chinese suppliers and so on. And if you look at, when Siemens carved out the communication business into NSN, really the top sellers were energy and healthcare. Yeah. So in a decade, this changed dramatically. So what is the message here? I mean, if we compare, with Apple, how they really kept, they kept it. And I think it's important in the leadership, continuity. It's important that you don't give up, right? You have this, Steve Jobs, he was a really visionary, so he never gave up.
Okay.
And so that's important also here. Today we have Google, right? Let's see what is coming up tomorrow.
Yeah. João, thank you very much. José Carlos, you have a very large outsourcing and IT services organization where you are hiring people that are 20 years old, the digital natives. How do you cope, as Andrew was mentioning, how do you cope these digital natives coming into your organization with people that if I see you, I don't see any pad, not a...
Oh,
yeah, that's the small pad. So how do you cope with this?
Yeah.
And also maybe some comments on Andrew's.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you to APDC for the invitation and Alexander. I think it was a very interesting piece that Andrew presented, and it touched exactly some of the points where we have the challenge. So we are not an Apple, neither a Google. We are a consultant and an integrator and an outsourcer company. We have 1,100 employees in Iberia, and we need to understand that 3 years ago we had the average age of the company above 40 years old. Today we have near the 32 years old. Wow. That means that we change completely the company. And we are recruiting normally 200 people, 150, 200 people per year from different academies and also from professional schools. So we don't go only to the universities, we go below that level to the technical schools. Now that creates, as Andrew was saying, the so-called digital gap. How to cope a company that has the basic value that we have is the teamwork. We cannot create nothing without teams that have been created for a proposal, for a project, for a service, and after it's finished, is disbanded and started again. And simultaneously create an innovative environment where new things are being created to create value to clients with people that don't understand us. You know, how the hell they understand what is a P&L? Mm-hmm. They understand about Facebook. They understand about Twitter. They know how to use that to work, but they don't understand our language. So we are under a process of transformation, and specifically in Iberia, we are doing a transformation that is not only the physical side, you know, even our facilities. We are creating a concept of probably the most social thing that we use on our daily basis, which is the coffee shop. So we are creating inside the offices the coffee shop. We don't have beer, we don't have alcohol, but we have an environment where people join, work, and go away. We are leaving the traditional hotspot. We don't need any more hotspots. We need places where people collaborate physically and sometimes virtually, because not everybody is in the same location. Secondly, we need to understand that our internal communication needs to be different. The leadership cannot be done in exactly the same way, you know, very structured type of information that goes through the mail or to internal type of media, but needs to use all the new things. So the Facebook, the blog. I've become a blogger. So, you know, at a certain time, you become used to those things. I have also kids, so I've been very well educated by my kids. But you need to use that, and you need to have the right tone of voice. You know, you cannot express to people of 20 years old like us. So you say you took out your tie. Normally, I have the Friday jeans, and my work around in the office at Fridays exactly to meet those people and make sure that we have a much more comfortable approach, not using this thing and a suit. And of course, that's also a part of the game. So we need to create the conditions where we communicate, and our organization needs to still have a little bit of the command and control. That's a normal thing of an organization. We need to have the command and control. But we need to get rid of this very silo-oriented approach and allow the communication and the collaboration to appear to create value to clients. So that's a basic concept behind all of these virtual and thing. And probably, and just to finalize, our budget in training changed dramatically. We spend roughly 2 million euros per year in training. In the past, it was probably 80% on the normal technical skill, you know, ACP model X, Java X version. Today, we spend 60% in behavioral type of training.
Yeah,
Of course. Yeah. So that's the kind of change that we are operating in the company.
Thank you very much. Now turning to the audience, and I think, is there a mic? Van, is there a microphone somewhere? Yeah. So now turning to the audience, and I think that the best way probably is to collect, say, 3 questions, and then leave up to the audience here to touch on those questions. So who wants to go first? Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Andrew, some time ago, I was talking with Paulo, and I learned that there are a tendency in the market today to appear a new type of CX function in. That is, he was telling me that was the digital chief
Digital Officer.
Chief Digital Officer. In certain companies, starts to appear this type of position, this type of function. My question to you is, you know, according to the Portuguese Constitution, in order to be President of Portugal, you need to have at least, I guess, 35 years. So Mark Zuckerberg cannot be President of Portugal. But I know that the Queen Elizabeth became queen with 17 years old, or I guess. Now there are a film showing his father and his problem with speech. So what is my question? My question is, do you think that there are an age to be a digital leader? Not a minimum age. I'm talking about the maximum age. Because I saw 2 leaders of the companies and none of them have tablets. What's your vision on that?
Okay, so we have a question now on the Chief Digital Officer. A second question? Come on, I'm sure that there are questions popping up on your mind. So we have another one over here. Yeah, sure. And then there's another one on this side.
Good morning. João, you're mentioning that, if I understood correctly, that failure was justified by intelligence reasons in 61% of the cases. Did I understand correctly?
Sorry, say it again.
Sorry, João Picoito was mentioning some statistics on failure and the reasons for failure, and 61% was due to intelligence or IQ matters, right? So I was reading the book by Malcolm Gladwell, and he writes about the relevance of IQ. And he ends up concluding that in order for you to be as successfully as a very high IQ person, you just need to be sufficiently intelligent. And also, it's not because you have an Einstein IQ that you have a guarantee of absolute success. By the contrary, there is some statistics that say that in a statistical relevant sample of very high IQ people, the majority is not so successful as the ones that are only sufficiently intelligent. And so this goes directly to the point that emotional intelligence and practical intelligence is maybe more relevant than a very, very high IQ. So it's just, I don't know, maybe a comment, and if you want to add something about that, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. So there's another question on this side. So this one was on failure, IQ, and UQ. So third question now.
Good morning. I'd like to to give you another challenge different than recruiting the new digitals, because I'm quite fine with the new digitals. My question is, how do we make the other ones, the people above 35, I would say, to work the same way the digital youngsters work? How do we make them to work with the new collaborative tools, and because they are the ones that are in leadership positions, and if they don't adopt those tools, we won't be performing at the high standards.
Okay, so the third question now on the over 35 years old and how to adapt them to the new digital world. Okay, Andrew, do you want to go first?
There's a sort of ageist sort of underlying theme to some of this stuff, which is slightly worrying. I'm Steve Jobs, by the way. I think
maybe we at the APDC, maybe we invited the wrong people into this room. Eh? So.
Steve Jobs, I think, is 57, so there's room for quite a few of us still to adapt, I believe. I think about the point about Chief Digital Officer for a moment, I think I suppose one of the interesting debates there is, do you appoint somebody as a sort of digital guru, and therefore you think you've solved the problem? Or do you somehow try and make the whole organization digitally aware? Do you try and do everything from the center, or in a federated way, do you try and sort of populate that? And I suspect the answer, unsatisfying as it may sound, is neither one is necessarily the silver bullet. There are quite a few organizations now who are appointing a chief digital officer. And I think largely that's because they believe that they are so far away from either thinking it's necessarily something where so many people now inside their organization are already digitally aware, because they just haven't had to do it in terms of their day-to-day work. That actually you do need to have some sort of evangelist. But I think it's a real danger that if you just have a chief digital officer, then, like many things, you're just actually having some sort of idea from the center which doesn't really settle inside the organization. So it only ever work if you combine that with something which actually does change a lot of the training inside the organization as well. So there are quite a few organizations furthest away, normally, from what we consider as digitally really enabled organizations who are thinking about appointing either a chief digital officer or at least somebody inside the organization who is a digital guru. So far as I'm aware, largely because in America it's illegal, nobody has told us that we have to either worry about the age or even ask the age. So it has to remain not one of the issues.
Okay. João?
Right. I didn't get your name? Daniela. So your question. I mentioned, that's not such a nowadays high correlation between high IQ or traditional IQ to be successful. Obviously, the corollary of this axiom is also not that you need to be stupid to be successful, right? So, but the point is, if you go back to the 80s, you applied, I applied for jobs in the 80s, late 80s, and many companies put me through these IQ tests and so on. So it was really important at that time, right? And if I see across my career, I really met really intelligent people, real IQ, extremely high, but really I didn't see them developing, in their own job or career. So clearly, we live internet world is a different world, because you manage a lot of information. It's really compressed. When I start working, I was getting maybe a couple of letters a day and a couple of faxes a day. Nowadays, I'm getting 150 emails. So it's huge. So everything is getting compressed. The cycles are compressed, everything. So, right, you need new type of skills. Entrepreneurship, curiosity, being bold, what you really, people that drive their professional life in a bold way, So that's what you need in a company to be successful or to help be successful. That's one of the key, having a very, very solid set of values, both professional, personal life. So that's the things. And not really, this big IQ. So that's the message here, underlying, the...
Okay.
Thanks for your question, Daniel.
José Carlos?
Yeah. In relation to the theme of the IQ and so on, I used to say that in my particular business, we are on the brainware business. We sell intelligence, we sell consultancy, we do outsourcing of process for clients. So we need people that are smart, but that are smart collectively, because of course, sometimes there is a problem where someone, a specific person with a huge IQ and very smart, fix a specific problem. But the basic day by day, we need a collective intelligence and not one guy that is very good. And that normally doesn't work in a company or in an environment where you need people that are capable to talk each other smartly, but simultaneously agreeing, doing compromises. And that's the team spirit that you need to have in any company that does this type of thing. So sometimes what happens is that the framework where these people operate is not so well tuned for him and makes a failure. And also sometimes it happens that the guys are sufficiently intelligent to make sure it is a success. That's the reason why the same guy can fail and have a success, just because of intelligence. Now, I do think that the collectively, as a whole, as a body, intelligence is what is important. So you cannot just have IQ. You need to have the emotional part of it, the behavioral part of that. And that in some cases is probably on the more than 35 years old, which I am one of them. We need to sometimes adapt ourselves to a new world, while this collective intelligence sometimes is under tools where they collaborate on a very electronic way, and digital way. But answering your question, Raul, is very simple. It's the people needs to adapt ourselves. We need the experience, we need the capabilities that people through the years of experience are going to have. But we need them also to adapt to a new world. And that new world means that there are opportunities, challenges, but also threats, as usual. And so the question is exactly that. We need people to adapt to the new things. It's like if we were, 15 years ago, we were talking about the beginning of the internet. And it's exactly the same thing, Everybody was looking at the internet, and a few ones were saying, wow, it's going to be huge. But the majority of the people were looking at it and saying, okay, probably, it's interesting, nice gadget. It's going to change the world. 15 years ago, many people were asking this question. Now the question is the same. Is this digital collaboration world going to change? If you saw, for instance, the 3D printing that people are coming along and that exists already, printers that cost $5,000 that does 3D printing. That is not going to change many of the concepts that we have today. And that means that we need to adapt our organizations to this. And people in the organizations, independently of age, I think people are smarter independently of age. Mm-hmm. People are smarter, period.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there a fourth question, another question from the audience? If that is the case, then Andrew, I'll ask you a question. One of the issues when we were discussing this session today, one of the issues that we were discussing was about this change, this fundamental change from the marketing person being the lateral thinker, leader, and now with this huge amount of data, having the need for a different person here. Now, my question to you is, throughout the world, do you see that the organizations are more towards trying to find two different people to do this, so having CMO 1 and CMO 2, or is it, or are the clients really asking for, let's have everything on one single person, and whether can we find it?
I think clients always try and find everything in one person. Normally, that person has to walk on water as well, so it's normally in one. But it does actually raise an interesting issue, is that how do you maintain creativity at the same time, and innovation, at the same time as really, really upping analytical capability. And I was just thinking, as we were talking about EQ and IQ, and it is absolutely right, there is strangely a slightly negative correlation between high success and IQ. But then how do people like Apple and Google, who outstandingly go for people with high IQ, how are they successful? So it's because there's a combination. It's not just one. It's a combination of IQ, in this case, and also deployment of soft skills. And how do they get this creativity right? In Google, their recruiting is they take as given that you have to come from with impeccable academic standards to get the IQ bit right. They then concentrate quite a lot, and they always ask on CVs for something which is the Google-ness. And what does that mean? It's very often nothing to do with what's in the career or what school they've been to. It's very often what's at the very bottom of the CV, about something different they've done. Yeah. They were, and Matt Britton, who runs Google in the UK now, was a rower, a UK rower. I mean, he did crew. But it could just as easily be somebody who's written a book about something, or it could be somebody who's supported an initiative in the not-for-profit sector. It can be anything, but it has to be utterly different to their day-to-day work, and it's got nothing to do with their academic credentials. And it just gives real flavor to the person. So they are looking for people with a Google-ness. And in some ways, that's their proxy for trying to find people who are both analytically very clever, but also have got their own mind, they've got their own thoughts, they're not geeks, they've done something different, which turns, and that tends to be the way they sort of try and bridge that. But it is a challenge. Nobody walks on water, and probably it's a small set of people who are great marketeers and who are also extremely analytically good. But that is a challenge. The way Google get for it is by looking at the bottom of the CV.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, according to this iPad in front of me, it's 10:28, so we have 2 minutes left. So thank you very much, José Carlos, João, and Andrew. Thank you very much for being here today. And I think that Marta will give us just the final words. Maybe we can stay here just for this final minute.
Just to finalize, just to thank you very much to Andrew for such an interesting presentation. I hope you enjoy it. I definitely did. I found out I'm in the digital gap because I don't have children, and I definitely didn't cheat in my tests with internet, so have to have children or go back to college, definitely. And also to João Picoito and João Carlos Gonçalves for sharing their experience and their ideas on leadership. I definitely learned something today. I hope you did too, and I hope you enjoyed it this morning. Thank you very much for coming. I just want to give notice of the following events of APDC. We'll have on the 30th of March the the trust, control and compliance, what's the real cost. And on the 31st of March, we're going to have the elections for the new governing bodies of APDC. I hope you can join us on both of these events. And thank you very much again. Thank you.